Well, this is amazing. This is my first time, I think in like a year and a half, presenting to a room full of people. So usually you just see me from here. So I think we're all just lucky we're wearing pants. What do you think? Just touch and go this morning, but I managed to do it. So listen, it's absolutely great to be here. I'm thrilled to be able to share our story with you. And just great to be back at these events in person and interacting and networking with folks. I was down at the A&A Masters event last week, and that was great too, just to see some of my colleagues and friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. So great to be back. I'm sure you're all feeling the same way. And I'm going to start with, the question I get the most is, what's it been like? Walgreens, obviously being an essential service and being right in the center of everything that's gone on during COVID. Main question is, well, what's it been like? And tell us some of the stories of what you went through in what was just a remarkable experience for all of us. Really interesting. In the early days, it was just, how do we survive and how do we operate, right? It was a lot of unknowns. Right now, we take for granted things like social distancing and all the safety precautions. But in the early going, we just didn't know what to do. The idea of putting plexiglass up in 9,000 stores across the country was a pretty daunting thing. All the extra cleaning we had to do, making sure that all of our team members were safe and our customers and patients were safe, and just making sure that we were viable as a business in the context of COVID was just a remarkable experience. And it really, I think, showed the strength of our operational focus and our operational capability as an organization that we were able to do it. I went through some really interesting times when I'm sure you probably remember at some point worried about getting toilet paper, worried about getting, things like paper towels and cleaning supplies. We went through this really interesting period where, a lot of our shelves were just empty. And then that started to come back, and then we entered into the phase of, masks becoming a big thing. So you stock up on masks, and then when our sales go through the roof because we've got masks. And just a really, really crazy early period. And then we got into the next phase of it, which was really, starting to think about vaccination and what is that going to look like. And the complexity of that is just really hard to overstate. I mean, we, in the first phase of it, it was going out to, healthcare facilities, people who were elderly, going out to those facilities, vaccinating people on premise. So that was a very new thing for us. We hadn't really done a lot of that. So we basically had to build this new muscle to actually take our show on the road, right? And while we've always done vaccinations, when you think about the flu shot is a vaccine. We do a number of other vaccinations, shingles, et cetera, the idea of the COVID vaccine was a little bit different, right? Because you got all these requiremements for temperature levels and things of that nature. And you had to, really make sure that you were caring for the real precious supply that was under our care during that period. And then when we started to get into, eligibility being different state to state and the control of supply being very different, I mean, the complexity then started to enter into the reality of like the experience that we had to build. People showing up at our store without an appointment, maybe not being eligible, different eligibility requirements state by state. We had different supply issues in different parts of the country. And the supply was very limited relative to the incredible demand. And so our organization was faced with this like real intense period of time where we were responding almost hour to hour to the changing dynamics across the country. Pretty amazing thing to be a part of. And then we entered into the next phase, which was supply started to become really prevalent, and then the demand really outstripped that supply in the early phase. But then once it started to even out, that's when the marketing dynamic really kicked in high gear, right? And we were very, very customer driven during this period of time because, there were different reactions to the vaccination rollout across the country. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on in my presentation. But what we learned very, very quickly was that everybody's issue was different. Everybody's reaction to getting the vaccine was very, very personal. And so the approach that we took needed to match up with the way people were feeling in those moments about their own personal decision and whether to get vaccinated. where to go and get vaccinated, whether they were comfortable coming to a Walgreens, whether they wanted to do it at a government facility or whatever. So just a lot of dynamics at play. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but this was our primary message, right, around this is our shot to getting back to normal. And this was the way that we went to market in terms of the key messages. Just shifting gears a little bit, what was going on during this period was not only we had to adapt and transform to what was happening in the context of COVID, but we were also in the process of transforming our business. So if you think about Walgreens, a couple of years ago, still a very, very traditional retailer, right? Now 9,000 store locations across the country, not really known for its digital capability, not really known as an e-commerce entity. Marketing at the time was very, very traditional. It was really a mass marketing, kind of one message to many kind of approach. And so while we were engaging in the COVID operating model, we were also transforming our business. And it really was the engine that drove our growth over the last couple of years. I'm going to tell you about how we did it. So mass personalization is the term that we use because we're operating at such huge scale. The word mass needs to be there, right? Because the idea of personalizing and doing it at the kind of scale that we're operating is even more complex than it would be in a smaller organization or a B2B organization when you're largely face-to-face with people. We got to personalize and do it, really with the entire country in mind. And so we did a few different phases of this. The first phase we called sort of the mass personalization program, and this was really us just getting better at using our existing marketing capability, mainly related to CRM, and just getting better at personalizing messages and using our existing. We started to change the muscle memory of our organization. We went from, doing mass marketing, big broadcast creative, and we started to experiment and get into a test and learn mindset around how we were delivering messages to different customers, depending on what we knew about them. And it was just the real basics and the starting point of that. The second phase of this was a real strategic move we made around this idea of My Walgreens. And I'm going to talk about that because it's, I think, really one of the marquee deliverables of the last couple of years for our organizations. We also knew that our existing technology was not going to get us to this land of mass personalization. And so we've been implementing a lot of marketing technology, and we've been doing it at record pace. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. And then the last phase of this, which I'll spend some time on, is we actually built a media business around this capability that we built. The Walgreens Advertising Group is our retail media business, and we're leveraging all of the capability that we built and passing that on, particularly to our CPG partners and to our pharma partners, so that they can access our customers through the same technology that we built for ourselves. And all this has meant an incredible transformation of talents, our agency relationship, the relationship with our IT organization, because we could not execute on this strategy without strong fundamentals on IT and technology implementation. And so all this was just a profound change that was happening in the midst of the context that I gave you around COVID. So just an incredibly intense time for our company. So My Walgreens, in a lot of ways, people think of My Walgreens as our loyalty program. And it is that. My Walgreens is the brand for our new loyalty program. But the other thing that we were trying to solve for was, because of the, call it, lack of investment in our digital experience prior to a couple of years ago, we had basically created this monster for our customers where they had to go to all kinds of different places to interact with all three things Walgreens. You go to one place if you want to refill a prescription, you go to a different place if you want to shop our front of store, you got to go to a different place if you need support. And so the whole concept of My Walgreens was to start the journey of bringing all these experiences together into one digital-led customer experience that gave you the gateway to all things Walgreens. And we did it in the context of loyalty, because the loyalty experience that customers have with Walgreens, in a lot of ways, is has been their gateway and their entry point for Walgreens. So all these things now, you want to access our photo business, you want to access Find Care, which is our platform for finding health support beyond the pharmacy. You want to shop our e-commerce. All this now comes through this My Walgreens experience. And so this was the strategy that we had. But we also had a fundamental issue to resolve, which is we had this really, really widely adopted loyalty program called Balance Rewards. Probably many of you were customers of Balance Rewards, but it had a lot of flaws associated with it. It was basically a retail transaction model. You buy stuff from us, we give you points, you can use those points, come back and get a discount the next time you shop. It didn't really create an experience. The point system itself we found was really confusing for people, so we wanted to change that and turn it into this concept of Walgreens Cash. So people knew when I buy $20, I'm getting $2 worth of value out of doing that, and it became a lot more intuitive. We've also got this notion of elevated experiences, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we also wanted to expand beyond just the transactional nature of it. We wanted to reward customers for healthy actions, participating in local communities, and begin the journey of this becoming a health and wellness destination. Because remember, what was happening in the context of COVID is there was a real, I would call it a reawakening of our company in terms of its purpose and in terms of its brand. And we became a real authentic, trusted source in the communities for people making their own personal decision around all things COVID. And that, what we saw was just, taking our brand to a whole new level in terms of all of these equities that we all strive to move, right? Around, we're a human brand, we care for people, we're in the community. And then particularly around health and wellness, it gave us a real insight that, we got to get back to the core of being a health and wellness brand. And so this My Walgreens strategy was all a big part of us driving and creating a platform for us to get back to our core on health and wellness. And this is unbelievable, okay? So these blew away a lot of our expectations. So think about this. The other issue we had with Balance Rewards was we didn't ask you for a lot of information about yourself. So we had very thin profiles. So even though I had 100 million people in our Balance Reward program, I knew very little about them except for basically what they bought and sold from us in the front of store. And so with My Walgreens, what we asked customers to do was to re-authenticate themselves with us, where before we were just asking for a simple phone number. It could be your home number, it could be your cell phone. You may have changed cell phone numbers, then created another account. It was a mess, right? And then more importantly, I didn't actually request permission to interact with you. And so I had very little ability, even though I had 100 million customers in my program, I couldn't actually communicate with them. How frustrating is that? So what we did through this was we re-authenticated approaching 100 million people across the country and moved them from this Balanced Reward program into My Walgreens. So now they've got a single point of entry into Walgreens. They've re-authenticated, they've given me in many cases, they've given me their email address, permission to communicate with them via email, given me their mobile number and permission to communicate with them via SMS. They've downloaded the app, and now I've got them engaged with me. And so this began last November. We're approaching 1 year, and we should, by the time it approaches the full year, we will have re-authenticated our entire 100 million base of customers. And you can see some of the other numbers here, and this has just created tremendous amount of value for our company. So before I move on to Walgreens Advertising Group, I just have a little video that just sort of captures all things My Walgreens. So if we could run that video, that'd be great.
You are one of a kind, and at Walgreens, we want nothing more than to make you the whole you, and nothing but the you happier and healthier. We've been doing that in the four walls of our pharmacies since 1901, but more often than not today, it's happening in places with no walls at all. Existing in a cloud of all your experiences is a platform called My Walgreens, an easier way for people to shop, discover value, and stay well, anytime, any place. For when you need things in minutes, not days. For when you need a pharmacist right in your pocket. And like getting more for less. With help from partners like Adobe, Microsoft, and WPP, we've created new, richer ways to interact that feel more relevant. Through investments in digital experience and marketing tech, we've grown our digital reach by 100%, boosting usage nearly 40% and traffic 50% year over year, further unlocking rich first-party data. With 70 million members, both our Net Promoter Score and membership numbers leaped over 40%. Internally, we created new ways of working cross-functionally across teams and a new advertising group, rooted in helping brands create meaningful experiences using the same data, platforms, and tools. Retail sales up 30 basis points. Digital sales up 78, helping you feel more connected, no matter the touch point. What's next? Implementing this new culture of test and learn with you at the center of every media and messaging decision. Because at the center of every sniffle, health goal, gift, or quick fix, we know there's a you.
So it just gives you a flavor for where we're headed. The reason this is so important is those 100 million customers are now first-party data records for Walgreens, right? And the power of that is I know who they are. I can create an identity around who they are, both in terms of the relationship that they have with Walgreens, and then I can use other data assets to bring a full picture of those customers together. And if you think about where our industry is heading, in the cookieless world, I'm not going to be able to rely on, call it the usual ways to reach customers. So this 100 million identities that I have becomes a really powerful asset for our company. And the more I can tailor people's health and wellness experience, the more engaged they're going to be with Walgreens, the more data and the more information I'm collecting, and my ability to target them becomes even more sophisticated over time. And so what Walgreens Advertising Group is that's an opportunity for our customers and our partners to be able to participate in this network. So we're now able to use those 100 million records and actually offer media services to CPG companies and other marketers who want to be able to use our data and our information to be able to target our customers with their products and services. So if you're a L'Oreal, if you're a Coke, if you're any of these CPG companies and you're spending money on television advertising, you're spending money on radio, whatever it is you're spending on that's largely a very non-targeted type media, this is an opportunity to get incredibly efficient. You can see some of the numbers on this chart. And the power of this is we can actually close the loop. So we know when somebody actually transacted with us as a result of the advertising that we're serving on behalf of that supplier partner. So a really, really powerful alternate profit source for us, and just yet another way to leverage this asset to drive performance in the Walgreens business. And so this is core to it. We call it the Walgreens Identity Network. So it's not just our own 100 million customers, but we're also using that 100 million customers and profiling as many of them as we can, and as many customers who are not currently within our 100 million, My Walgreens base. And so this is our engine for being able to target all of our media throughout all of our ecosystem. And so we're doing this on our .com site. We're doing it in our mobile app. We're increasingly doing it in store with assets and partnerships like Cooler Screens, for example, which we now have in over 700 of our locations across the country and growing. And we're also doing this in third-party media. So we're able to use this engine to market not only using our own media dollars, but also using media dollars from third parties. So this is just a real quick example. So going back to COVID, so how does this actually manifest itself? So we use this engine and this identity network to really segment and hyper-personalize our communication to different parts of the ecosystem that we're contemplating vaccination. So this is just an oversimplified example of that. So we started to plot people on a grid of where they were in their own journey around hesitancy and also vulnerability. So were they in a underserved market? We needed to appeal to them on a different basis, or were they in a affluent market but were hesitant for different reasons? Then we overlaid geography and all kinds of other dimensions to hyper-personalize the way that we approached the vaccination marketing effort. And I can tell you that our share of the vaccination market was disproportionate to what we would usually see in terms of share relative to other retailers. At the peak of this, Walgreens was doing close to 1 out of every 10 shots in the country. So think about that and how much of a powerful purpose that gave us throughout COVID. So real quick, I'm a little short on time, so I'm going to just move ahead. So how are we going to use this moving forward? So one of the things we've done over the last little while is use this identity graph and all of the insights that we have around customers to try to get a little bit more focused on bullseye customers around health and well-being. And what we discovered as we did that insight work is that there's a small proportion of our customers that make up a large portion of our profit, okay? And so we wanted to see what those customers look like so that we could obviously make them more loyal to us and then also seek to acquire more customers. So here's what they roughly look like, just to give you a sense of it. Probably no surprise, right? So people who are really sick, right? So we call them the polychronic customers, people who are dealing with multiple chronic conditions. We make a lot of money off them, right? We care for them as much as we can. We provide as much support for them in their own health and wellness journey. But also, when you're filling lots of prescriptions and you need lots of health and wellness products, that's where we make a lot of money. Chronic customers, and then caregivers, right? People who are caring for the people who are in those chronic and polychronic. So moving forward, this will now be our focus, right? Because we now know that we need to build experiences that are particularly and uniquely appealing to those types of customers. Things like a new to therapy experience, right? You've just been diagnosed with diabetes or high blood pressure. So what does that look like? You got a lot of questions. You want information about the drug that you've been prescribed, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll build a unique and personalized experience in that space. And we'll just continue to leverage the experience that we have, particularly with a mobile-led approach, to just make sure that we're uniquely appealing to those types of customers. So that's all the time I have. Barry's coming back up. I'm happy to take some questions if we have time, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of what we've been through over the last couple months.
Let's take a couple of questions. Go to slido.com to register your questions. Let's see, we got a couple of quick questions for Patrick here. And I think we'll put Slido up in a minute, right, Ajay? Is Slido coming up? All right, good. By the way, thank you for helping to vaccinate America. It's so important that Walgreens does it. We actually, in Noah class, I don't think he's in here, but Noah, in talking to people when we had to have vaccinations to attend this event, we actually vaccinated about 10 people. We told them they couldn't get in unless they were vaccinated. So thank you for helping that as well. All right, here, let's see. How does the tighter segmentations that you've niched out here, and by the way, Intersection and Michael Rosen is providing the Slido. Hello, Michael. Hey, guys, there's seats here, lots of seats. Please come over here. There's seats in here, seats in there. And could you close the door and come sit down? Thank you. So how can we, how does that translate to media?
So that's a great question. And, this is, I think the key takeaway here is if you want our money, you got to be able to actually do this targeting capability, right? So, for all the media partners that are out there, this whole industry got to embrace this idea of personalizing, right? So if I can reach a customer who's in a particular geography with a placement based on the information that I have about that customer, you're going to get my money, right? And so that's going to involve us doing data integration. So we've started to really do a lot more direct connects with media partners. We're starting with some of the larger ones, but eventually when we get into APIs, smaller companies will be able to connect directly to our data stores. And then all of a sudden that opens up, not only our own media, but also through the retail media, through the Walgreens advertising group, you'll be able to leverage this capability. So that's where all this is heading, right? So it's that direct connect. And then when I'm targeting a particular segment, we'll be able to do that without having to jump through a lot of hoops. It's no longer demographic segmentation or any of those sort of call it more basic. It's based on my data. And that's where it becomes powerful. So, that's where all this is heading.
It's very important, and that's helpful to the group here. Does Walgreens have a digital video network? Now we see Target starting to do that, Walmart starting to do that, and the coolest screens guys here, Anybody here from Cooler Screens? Yeah, there's Arson and Chris. Excellent. So I know you've got Cooler Screens, which looks great. Any other?
Yeah, that's probably the most scaled example. We have a number of different pilots going on in the stores. We're trying to sort this out ourselves. Cooler Screens is a great example of a particular category leveraging digital capability, and more and more that's becoming targetable. So I know what store it is. Obviously, I know what inventory I have in that store. And where we'll go next is if you're interacting with the My Walgreens experience, and if you've got the app open or if you're in store with your mobile device, I'll know it's you, and then the Cooler Screens advertising can reflect the information that I have about you, and I might use a QR code to pop you a coupon, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where all this is going. In stores, a little complex, because the investments, the capital outlays are obviously very significant, especially when you're operating at this kind of scale. So we've got to be really selective and test our way into it. So that's what we're doing.